We're in Photoshop. I have closed down my other file. I'm going to make a new file, and this one I'm going to want to make it a square just because of the nature of what I'm doing. I'm going to be making wood. So I can do 800 by 800. It's a pretty reasonable size. Well, everything else should be the same, and I'm just going to hit create. Now, by default, it always comes up with this background layer. And the background layer is always locked. Oops. So I'm going to make a new layer, and this is the layer that I'm going to put my wood texture on. So in order to create a new layer, I come down and I click on this little plus sign, and it's going to make what's called, in this case, layer 1. I'm going to double click on layer 1. I'm going to name it wood grain. Wood grain or just wood. What color is wood? Brown or reddish, brownish, something. This is the part I'm not really good at. Some of you are aware that I'm relatively colorblind. So finding red-brown is not always easy for me. One thing that helps with this process is this little checkbox that says only web colors. The reason that this checkbox is really cool, go Quan. There's a little 2 color boxes down here in the lower left, the black and white one. If you click on one right here, then you can change the color. Yep. Now I like to click on this only web colors. Again, the reason for that is because isolating between the colors is kind of tough for me. So I want to find a, I don't know, kind of a brownish color. Is this brownish? Is that dark brown? Is this brown? This looks pretty brown to me. I'm going to go with that one. I don't know. Doesn't matter. And then I have to find a second brown color. Because if we're making wood and we just paint it brown, then it's like we're making textures for a Nintendo 64. We don't do that anymore. It has to be a little bit more detailed than that. So I'm going to click on the background color. So the foreground color I've made brown. The background color I'm going to make brown. But I'm going to have to make it a lighter shade of brown, I guess. Maybe here. Is that brown? What color is it? Light green. So this needs to come this way. But that looks too red. What about that? Is that brown? Light brown? Perfect. So I have a really dark brown and a light brown selected. Again, this is a challenge for me, so going through that process, I appreciate all the assistance that you all could give. The math would work the same if I used green and blue, but it wouldn't look as good. Go, Quan. No problem. So if you click on, this depends on which one you click, right? So if I click on this one on the foreground, I'm changing that color. When I want to change the back one, I just click on the little box and that's the background box, and then I can change that color. Say it again. That's what I'm doing. So we still have a white canvas. Nothing's on it. I'm going to come up to filter. And one of the things that we like to do when we're creating textures is you just have to get some paint on the canvas to start working with. So I'm going to come all the way down to render. I'm going to render fibers. So filter, render, fibers.
Yeah, the texture I have looks good. Yeah.
So it's a good start, right? You can change the variance, you can change the strength, you can randomize it, all of this, and basically what you're doing is just creating a base layer for what your wood's going to look like. And then you just say okay, and it fills your entire canvas with this texture. Go, Aiden.
Yeah.
So we should have 5 planks, give or take. Some of you might have 4, but they look like this. All I want to do is drag them so they're kind of snapped together and they fit beside one another really, really easily. And by nature, I need them to be in order for what I'm going to try and do. So this is kind of hard. I have layer 1. Layer 1 needs to be the furthest left layer. Layer 2 needs to be next to layer 1. Layer 3 needs to be next to layer 2. Layer 4, I think you'll see where I'm going, needs to be next to layer 3. And then layer 5 needs to be on the end. Go ahead, Quan. Or no, David.
Left is also workable if it goes from right to left too, or from left to right, or best if from left to right.
Technically, you can do it either way.
Yeah, because that's what I did.
Yeah, as long as they're in order from one to another, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't want to split late.
So when you're selecting, you use your move tool. There's an auto select feature up here. And with the auto select feature, you'll notice as you hover your mouse over elements on a layer, it highlights that whole layer over here. And then you just click and drag. And as you're dragging, it should allow you to click all the different layers, and they should automatically snap to one another. Now I've done the cardinal sin here, where layer 5 and layer 3 look pretty much the same. Yeah. Not too bad, right? If I had time, I would go back, I would make more planks. But for the sake of the demonstration, they're just going to have to be the same. So, how do we designate, if we're looking at this, if you saw 2 planks on the board, 2 planks on the ground, how would you designate that you have 1 plank and 2 planks instead of just 1 big plank when you're looking at it? There's a seam, might be a gap in between them, right? There could be some rounding effect on the individual planks themselves, right? The bevel on the edge, right? To make it smooth. What we're going to do is try to simulate that kind of effect. I'm going to come to layer 1, and we're going to look at a whole new feature of Photoshop. And this is a really cool feature. It's called the layer tools or layer styles. You select your layer, and then you're going to double click in the space to the right of the text. And that brings up your really cool layer style. Once you bring up your level style, what I want you to do is click on bevel and emboss. I'm going to select a technique, chisel hard, after I click on bevel and emboss. And then I'm going to drag the depth up pretty high to like 500%. You'll have to click on bevel and emboss. Not just the check mark, you'll have to click on the actual words, bevel and emboss. Under structure, you'll have style, technique, depth. Eventually you'll have size, but we don't care about size right now. And then you'll have soften, which we will care about in just a second. But size could be anything. I think my size is 8 right now. So let's say you've already hit OK, right? You just come back and you double click on the spacing again. It brings it up. You click on bevel and emboss again, and it navigates you down, and then you can modify it. What I want to do is drag my softness up to probably 10 pixels. There's a lot of other tools, a lot of other options you can have, but none of them really matter for what we're doing here. So just hit OK. And that gives you one board that really looks like it could be a board, right? Another cool thing about Photoshop is when you get one layer looking exactly like you want. You can come back in and you can duplicate the effects of that layer. So if you right-click on layer 1, you can copy the layer style, and then you can right-click on layer 2, and paste the layer style, and rinse and repeat, and do that on layer 3, 4, and 5. That's pretty good, right? Pretty close. These boards are really, really close together, right? There's no gap in between them. Right? Which is, it's not unrealistic. We can build things with no gap in between them, right? But it's really hard to do. We don't always get things that close. They're that great. So another thing I want to add to my layer here is going to be a drop shadow. And I need the drop shadow to go from, I guess, left to right in this case. In David's case, it might be right to left. But really, I think maybe either way might work. Either way seems to work. And it doesn't need to be much, but it does need to have a really high opacity. I'm going to go from left to right. I'm going to give it a really high opacity and maybe a 20% spread. Size, I don't want it to be too big, kind of small. And distance, really close to 0. I think mine's 3 pixels. So I'm going to make the one, I'm going to copy that layer style. I'm going to paste it to my other layers. And that starts to give me this kind of idea of depth, right? That there could be something behind these planks. It's just really dark. I can't see through them. And I have a set of wooden planks that I could put onto the side of a box and say this is a wooden box, right? Once you have your artwork kind of satisfied where you like it, you can hold down Shift or hold down Control, either one, and select all 5 layers. And what a lot of people would do here is flatten the layers. And if you do that, right-click and flatten layers. I don't want to discard the hidden layers. Flatten, merge layers. Then I'll have one layer that has all of those planks on it. And that's okay, right? If you wanted to do that, you could. My preference is usually, instead of flattening the layers, to group them And there's a folder down here. I will call you another day. There's a little button down here that looks like a folder, and all that means is to group them together. And then you can give your group a name. Now, the cool thing about groups is it still has all of the individual layers inside of the group. But if you click on the group itself, oops. If you click on the group itself, then it will allow you to treat all of the objects within that group as one object. So you could scale them down together. And if you were trying to make wooden planks or a box, oops, come back. Then you could right click and you can duplicate that group. You can do that again. Do it again, right click, duplicate group. And I'm just doing this for effect. You don't need to do it yourselves. Give me 1 second. And you can make a wooden plank box, however that looks. Questions?
Just like how you group them in a file, like in a
Okay.
folder.
So to group them, you're going to select on each layer. If you hold down Shift, you can click more than one layer. And once you have your 5 layers selected, then there's a little folder that you just click on that folder and it automatically groups them together. And then when you go to move that group, you're going to want to turn off auto select.
Where's that?
Up here, when you use the move tool, there's an auto select feature. You want to turn that off, so no checkbox, and that will allow you to move the entire group together. If you leave on auto select, it's going to try to select individual layers, which is not what you want. You want groups. Up here in the upper left, when you click on your move tool, there's a little auto select feature. That's where we're gonna have to stop for today. We don't have enough time to keep going. But what I'll make an extra video for and send out for Thursday's class, I'm gonna model a crate. And then I'm going to ask you to use this wood texture that you've created to actually texture the crate. And some of your wood blocks for the crate, just for sake of understanding, will end up being this way instead, right? Because it's like you're building a box, right? But I'll go over all that in the video. Your expectation will be that you work on that on Thursday. One of the ways I like to run my classes is I like to have a lecture demonstration on one day, and then the next day is a project day where we're working to complete stuff. So for this Thursday, the project will be to texture that wood crate that I modeled and send out to you in Canvas. You'll use this technique. You can work on it on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and you'll bring it to class on Tuesday complete. Cool? I'm available for questions throughout that, except Thursday morning when I will be at the doctor with my kid. That's it. Class over. 11:50, right on time.